You noticed I hurried before the lyrics began. It's a Christian conference, after all. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. And there he is. I'm just going to start off with, I think we've already done it. Let's do it again. Let's say thanks to Michael. Would you? Can we say thanks to Michael? Now, I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to start with a story, and I'll walk around like Mark. I'm not as fast as Mark. Mark can just rip, man. I think he must have run track. But I'm going to tell you a story about Michael, because he came to me and he said, he goes, the elephant in the room, I think he said it last night, is there's not going to be as many people here as we originally thought. We had some scheduling problems, some of the school things. And I told him this story, and I think I should tell you this story. So earlier in my career, before I became this brilliant thing standing before you now, I worked in business theater. Do you guys know what that is? I don't know that they use that term anymore. So I would get hired. I worked for a company, and they would hire us like big corporations. They got their sales meetings at a hotel, or they've got some sort of thing going on a retreat. And so I did a lot of the creative wraparound, okay, hey, we're going to have this thing here. I'll write the skit. I'll do this. And you always would have some entertainment. And so I don't remember the client. I remember the hotel in Los Angeles, and there was a scheduling screw up. And our talent was, and this audience is old enough to remember, Tony, Orlando, and Dawn. Remember them? And it's my job to go to tell Mr. Orlando that, you know what, there's actually not going to be 1,000 people here. There's going to be 70. And band's here. He's in his thing. And, Tony was maybe on the backside of being the big Tony, and there was this long pause, and I'm thinking, this is the end of me. I'm over. And he looks at me, and he says, 70,000. I'd do the same show. And not only did he, this was incredible, because this was like one of those where it's just like, this is a world-class guy looking at a room about this size who's used to doing arenas. And not only did he began the first song, and he said, hold it, guys, hold it. And he made everybody, I'm not going to make you do this. He goes, come on up, let's round up. Let's round up. He looks back at the bus boys and the bartenders. He goes, come on, there's nobody buying drinks right now. Come on in. Call your friends. Before that 2-hour show was over, there were 1,000 people in that room. Hotel guests were like going, Tony Orlando's in there? And the only reason they stopped is another event was going. He played 2.5 hours. So Michael, if that ain't a loaves and fishes story like this is, I don't know what. So that's what it reminded me of. And it's the same thing. And you all, I don't have to explain that to anybody here. Who's here is exactly who was supposed to be here. And that's my favorite part of the whole thing. Thanks for having me here. I don't really do the notes, but I write a few keywords because all writers you give a writer a microphone, man, he's going to start somewhere and you've lost him. So when I need to land the plane, tell me and I'll go back here. I guess I'll just quickly tell you my story. I am a story guy, so I'll tell you who I am. I grew up right here in Nashville, Tennessee. I went to Hillwood High School. And I was that kid who just, I had the freckles, I was goofy, I was just that kid. And I fell into the Bill Gaither Trio's children's choir. Not because I was a great singer, they just didn't have no boys. So I get into this choir, and the fact that it was like 16 really, really cute girls didn't hurt. So of course I'm gonna go do that thing. And the next thing I know, I'm touring around this part of the country, all over the place. I'm 12 years old singing Jesus songs. But the thing about it for me, which was wonderful, I became a believer in that time, but listening to Bill Gaither and Gloria Gaither, if you know the Gaithers and everything, man, they were story people. Man, they were story people. And their music was fantastic, their spirit and everything, but I remember how the crowds would lean forward at their stories. And that's what started it for me. I got the Super 8 camera, and, we made our little backyard epics. We did that, just Spielberg did way better with that than I did. But I did it. I did it just like him. And the next thing I knew, I said, it's time for me to go to Los Angeles. I'm going to LA. I had done a few commercials here and there in Nashville, so I was kind of an actor. I thought I was going to be an actor when I got to LA. Yeah, that didn't work out too good. That didn't work out very good at all. But along the way, I always enjoyed just writing stories. I enjoy the process. I always have. Obviously, the master of the stories. We'll talk about him in a second. But really, what got me there and what got my interest, and I had to try a lot of things before I realized this is probably my route. Now, and I tell too many stories, so when I tell too many stories, tell me to stop. But here's another story, because here's how I actually got into what I do now. Is I write screenplays. That is I produce, I direct here and there, but my thing for 30 years has been writing screenplays. So I am going to USC. I got into the best college in the country for that. I got into, by the way, aside, I had no qualifications to get accepted to that school. I think Mark knows exactly what I'm talking about. You know what it was? And I asked at graduation, and she said, yeah, what was your first clue, Junior? Because I was from Tennessee. I was like, yeah, let's sort of diversify our thing here, so let's let him in. But I was still trying to act. Now, this was before the computerized world was really at its gist at that moment. So I got into a play at UCLA. And today, in 2024, that play from 1982 is still considered the worst play ever put on a UCLA main stage. Now, the problem with that was it was the summer theater workshop. There's a point to this story, I promise you. And we had to perform this turkey 14 times, and it was in the round. And I never left the stage, and neither did the star. So 14 times we go through the most agonizing oral surgery experience of your entire life. Last night, I come in after the wrap party. The star did not go to the wrap party. He was in his apartment. He had drunk the better part of a large bottle of Jack Daniels, weeping on the sofa. And he said, I quit. I'm never going to act again. And I was like, Shane, it was a bad play. It's okay, man. He goes, no, I'm never gonna. We went back and forth on this finally. I said, all right, fine, I'm so sick of this conversation. What are you gonna do? He goes, I'm gonna be a writer. I said, have you ever written anything? And he said, no. Here comes the movie line. But how hard could it be? 4 years later, I'm in a movie theater in Aspen, Colorado, on a date with a lovely young lady. Just went to the movies. There was one theater in Aspen. You just go to the movies. I don't know what's playing. I don't know anything about it. Sit down. The lights go down. The credits begin to roll. Written by Shane Black. And the movie was Lethal Weapon. And Shane went on to be the highest paid screenwriter in the history of screenwriting. He and Joe Esterhaus, those were the two dudes, right? I mean, he sold a script for $4 million. Well, here's me making $9,000 a year as a ski lift operator going, well, if he can do it, I'm gonna do it. And it was an overnight success thing. It was 13 years and 12 screenplays, and I got lucky and blessed, and thank you, Jesus. I sold a screenplay with my partner at the time called Space Cowboys with Clint Eastwood, and that began my career as a screenwriter. It's a whole lot of stuff, in between that. But the point I tell you about this thing is all the way along, and even to some extent in my 60s, I'm still saying, Lord, what are you doing with this? Why really am I doing it? It's been wonderful to me. It's raised my family. I am an anomaly. I've been doing it 30 years. The working life of most screenwriters, if they get there at all, is 5 to 10 years. And that has way less to do with me than him. I am absolutely certain of it. But it's, man, what a great run it's been. But here we are talking about, gosh, and by the way, all these talks have been amazing. I love listening to everybody's perspective here. But when we get right down to it, it all comes down to the story. What's the story? When I was a kid, there was this term, and I think a lot of you still remember it, was the great American novel. Do you remember that? in the 50s, 60s, 70s, the elbow patch, tweed jacket dude, and the women too, there was something so incredibly cool about the novel. The cool artists were all writing a novel. Up until, I'm gonna say, about 1981. And I love to pinpoint that movie in history, that moment in history, even if it's just my opinion. And I think it was Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I think it was that Lawrence Kasdan people. Do you remember Raiders? Everybody went berserk over Raiders of the Lost Ark. And anybody paying attention was like, oh, it's written by Lawrence Kasdan. And that is when the great American novel got pushed aside by the great American screenplay. And that was, there's a little bit of Hollywood history here because this is really important because that was the launch of the time when I was in Aspen, Colorado going, Shane Black. That was the beginning of the screenwriter's bonanza, the 1980s and the 1990s. There were guys like him looking out for guys like me. Hey, I want to option your script. Like, you bet. And the bidding wars and the things that were happening. So lots of us who really, I'm one of those guys who's like, I'm not a jack of all trades. I'm a jack of a couple of trades, master of none of those. But I looked at that and went, okay, well, I'm going to go for that because it was a bonanza time. It was 1849 California. We're out panning for gold. The 80s and the 90s. Bidding wars, all these giant movies. They paid exorbitant amounts of money. So suddenly, everybody and their brother and everybody and their sister was writing screenplays. I'm going to sell me a movie. Now, about 2000 or so, I wasn't going to tell you a history of the business and tell me to shut up when this bores you, but I think it's important because a lot of times I think we sort of look at what we're doing and the world we're doing, and we don't really fully know where we came from. And you all know that story. If you don't know where you come from, you probably don't know where you're going. Because this is an important piece of history. In 2000, the Writers Guild of America got stupid and got greedy. And they struck. And when they struck, all the heads of the major studios said, okay, we're going to give them this, we're going to give them this. Okay, let's all agree. No more of this $1 million bidding stuff for a screenplay I've never seen. And I've talked to executives who said, oh, that absolutely happened. And that was the end of the derby. Of like, get the agent, write the great script, and they're going to go sell it in a bidding war. Now, the reason that I'm really hammering on this, you'd be stunned 24 years later how many young writers think it still works that way. Because it doesn't. Doesn't. Every now and then a spec will pop somewhere, but those days are over. And just as a coda to this story, the Great American Screenplay has been replaced by, well, it was replaced by the Great American YouTube, and now I think it's the Great American TikTok. That's sort of the progression of where we are in the entertainment business. And Christians who, as we talk today, I'm a feature guy. And it seems like most of our attention is front-loaded toward the feature and Joe and his theatrical experience. I didn't get to hear your answer. I want to talk to you later about, let's keep looking forward. Streaming ain't going away. And I love the theater experience too. And no matter your experience of it, I personally do not think we're ever going back to the 2019 thing. I just don't. It's never going away. There's nothing like a movie in a theater. It's never going away. But I don't know about you. I got a pretty darn good screen up there with a pretty darn good sound system. And I go, hey, click. And I don't have to, my feet don't get sticky and people aren't talking on their cell phones behind me. So I just don't see that going away. I don't think that's going away. That's my industry analysis here as a screenwriter as I go forward. Let's go back to story. I'm a screenwriter. When Michael asked me to speak here, I was like, when I do talks, I'm at a festival, I'm at a writers group, and we talk about, everybody in there, I know what they want. They want to know what to do. How do I become a professional screenwriter? How do I get paid for it? Well, of course, I understand. There's not a whole lot of reason to spend hours and hours and years if you're not going to. It's shocking how incredibly basic it is, but how like lots of things, you can get lost in the details of things. You know, I have people come outside, you know, I'm having a struggle with what is the difference between a log line and a beat sheet converting to a treatment, or is a synopsis better? And I literally sit there and go, I don't know. I don't have the vaguest idea. But what I do know is, and this is funny because most writers they're not like me. I'm loud, energetic. The majority of writers are not really like that. So what I really want is like, I learn a really good agent. I can just write my screenplay, and there I go sell it, and then I'll just write my next one. I was like, great. Let me know how that works out for you, because it will not. The story. It's all about the story. And the story comes down to the pitch. Oh, the shy ones go, pitch? You mean I've got to sit with the lawyer and the producer and the company owner and say, okay, what you got? It's terrifying. It's kind of fun for me now because I've just done it so long and had no said to me so many times. It's like, well, you know, what's another one? I don't really. It's kind of fun. I get to make good friends. But the pitch is everything. You got a story in your mind. I don't know. I have no idea how many of you have aspired to be screenwriters. For all I know, some of you have written movies that got made. I don't know. Maybe you're like, and maybe you've got an idea. So let me just talk about my craft a little bit, if that is interesting to you. I'm not going to make this into a screenwriting seminar or anything like that, but it starts right here. And where it always starts is, you know the old saying, give me your story in how many words or less? You don't remember 25 words or less? God, I'm older than I thought. That used to be 25 words or less. Let me hear your story in 25 words or less. Well, let me tell you, and I used to think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. A screenplay back then was always 120 pages. It's less now, but the standard we talk about. Back then, I was like, how do you do that in 120 pages? I have characters. There are story arcs. You can't do that in 100. Okay, so a friend of mine is an executive at Warner Brothers, and he was in the room for this, and he said it's 100% true. The shortest pitch ever. Guy walks in the room, should remember the name of the writer and the producer. They came in together, forgive me, Mark. They come in together. President of Warner Brothers, it may have actually been Paramount now that I think about it. But anyway, it's like, what you got, Mark? And the guy goes, Samuel L. Jackson, snakes on a plane. Deal. You hear what I'm saying? Oh, I see it. Oh. So let's just say that you are thinking about this and you've got your idea. You need to be able to do it. That's extreme. But it's a it's a worrisome thing, because I'm a friendly guy and I love everybody. But after this many years, I've got this natural radar up when somebody goes, hey, I got a movie idea. And I'm always like, and so now what I do is I go like this. I go, man, that is great. You got 30 seconds. And I don't mean to be nasty about it like that, but it is. A lot of times I have sat, I bet you have too. Somebody has got an idea or something like this, and after minute 27, and you're just kind of going, yeah, how does this end? You know what? I can't believe this. This has nothing to do with anything but this, so I got to tell you. So one of my closest friends in high school, he's an airline pilot, and he's coming to the end of his career, and I get a message from him. He goes, hey man, I got a screenplay. I'm like going, okay, gracious. Yeah, it's like, sure, Joe, send it to me. So he sends me the script. So let me pitch this story to you. So here's the pitch. Airliner gets hijacked digitally by a terrorist group, so it will crash into where the president is speaking in Colorado. The pilot is married to the Air Force captain woman, fighter pilot, sent up to intercept. How about that? Like, dude, on page 10, I'm in. This guy's never written a screenplay before. It's rough. It's like, man, this is a great story. I'm reading here. So I talked about the pitch in the beginning, but then I realized on about 10 pages from the end, like, oh, Lord, they all died. Joe, I mean, if this is Chris Pratt and Kate Hudson, yeah, they can't die, man. You can't do that. Oh, and then there's the 200 innocent people there. Was it a great story? Yes, it really was. And I know as a producer, you've had to do this too, Mark. It's like, man, that's really great. That's the worst ending I've ever seen in my life. I couldn't sell this anywhere. So anyway, I don't know why I told you that story other than it just really, and this is a smarter guy than I am. I was like, dude, what were you thinking here? I don't get this. And he's like, you think I should change that? I'm like, yeah, man, I really think you should change that. I'd get right on that right now. Howie, get back onto it. The story. Now, the story, I don't need to tell everybody here, is the basis of all human connection. It's the basis of all communication. Hey, man, how you been? What's been going on? I'm going to hear a story. Watch a 30-second commercial I'm going to fall off. Watch a 30-second commercial on TV. There's a beginning, middle, and end. I don't know about the whole caveman thing. I don't know if there ever were cavemen. Whatever that was, I have no idea. But I know since back in ancient Greek days, people gathered together to hear a story. And the guy we call king, the master. And talk about short. That guy in 10 verses could do what I couldn't do in 10,000 pages. And maybe that was his secret. So what are the components of a story? First of all, and what a screenwriter does, what my job is, and I've learned over the years, I used to believe, as the producer chuckles again, I used to believe it's like, this is my story, this is my script, go shoot it. Right, Mark? Look at Mark laughing hysterically. No, this is the most collaborative art form there is by necessity. That's hard for artists. Artists have to learn how to be that way and to let that happen. But it truly is. What a screenplay truly is, all it is, it's a blueprint, it's an architectural drawing for the movie. That's what that is. And talk to anybody who's ever built a building in their life. Do they take that blueprint by the architect and go, that's it, every single bolt, 2x4 right there? Never in a million years. Never in a million years. I come from a construction background, trust me. Never works that way. Same with a movie. I can talk about the Reagan movie in a second, and I will. But every time I've ever made a movie before, every single time, it's changing. It's this growing beast, and it just gets, sometimes that gets away. If you don't have a producer and a director who's not really like, I can keep myself focused on what this is, it can get away from you. But almost every other time, guys, I worked with Clint Eastwood. And he's with Tommy Lee Jones, James Garner, Donald Sutherland. I'm going to leave it out. I'm leaving one of the great ones out. For 2 years of my life, I watched these guys make a movie. And so they had my brilliant script. But to watch what they do, watch what the experience does. There's a reason we remember them like that. It was the greatest experience of my life and the most instructive. Yeah, man, I gave you that thing. And another funny story. 10 years after my children they're about, 8. They're like, hey, Daddy, we've never seen this Space Cowboys movie you wrote. And it's like going, it's PG-13. It's a pretty big movie. Oh, we're about 8-9 minutes into it, and I forgot about a couple things that Clint threw in there, and Tommy Lee Jones threw in there, and it's like, hey, guys, we're going to turn this off now. It's like, Daddy, did you write that word? No, I didn't write that word. Okay, let me just tell you now, just in case a similar thing like this happens to you, and Clint Eastwood says a word you didn't write, don't charge into that set and go, no, that's not how I wrote it. Don't ever, and I didn't either. But it's a collaborative thing, and it's the union of a lot of people. Movies are really, as far as I'm concerned, they are the highest expression of human art. Look at it, it's a script. It's these brilliant actors. It's the music. It's the director of photography. It's the editor. You live and die by your editor. So I think the greatest breakthrough of my entire life as a guy who creates these things in his mind. I mean, Space Cowboys started in my mind and Ken Kaufman's mind. That's where it started. And just as an aside, to have that and to sit there and watch, it's a gas. It's a gas. I'm not going to pretend any different. But could I have done that? Of course not. No way. It becomes this fabulous team, lots of people, and that's why it's the greatest art form in the history of art forms. Let's get right down to what is it? I'm not going to teach you a whole screenplay boot camp here, but first of all, 3 acts. We think in 3 acts. You talk in 3 acts. Your favorite novel, your favorite movie, it's 3 acts. I love my scholar brother who taught Shakespeare for 30 years. Said, well, actually, Shakespeare, his were 5 acts. Well, certainly I'm not going to compete with Shakespeare as a writer. But actually, when you really break down old Billy's work, it's like, you know what? There's still a setup, a conflict, and a resolution. That's it. That's it. You know those 3? You've got the building blocks for your story. Secondly, character. We go to movies because we like watching people. We love watching people. We love watching people that are going through something similar to what we did or what we are. Like, oh, wow, I got some commonality there. I'm in. Have you ever gone to a movie where you're gone for that 2 hours? You forget you're in a movie. That's a well-drawn character. That's what that's about. As writers, if you are writing, if you're going through this process, spend infinitely more time on your character than on your plot. It is more important. I've been in the middle of that argument, which is more character, plot or character. Snakes on a plane, okay, that's a pretty good plot. I didn't write that. Why am I talking about that? But Samuel's character was pretty riveting. It's like, that's why I'm paying attention. I care. When you don't like a movie, it's because you don't give up what happens to the character. You're like, yeah, whatever. And I'm going to sound like the bitter old guy that I am, but so many of what I watch on some of these streaming services that I know they put that movie together in 6 months, and it's like, I just don't really care what happens to the character. That's why you don't like it. Heroes. We love heroes. And what does a hero do? A hero rises to do the things that they don't do it in the Bible. They rise to do a battle. These are the ones we love the most. They rise to lay down their life for their brother. They rise to defend the village, my family. They rise to what's right. Look at every one of the most successful movies of all time. It's the heroic code. That's what it is every time, all the big ones. That's what a hero does. We could spend 3 hours in a seminar on that. We're not going to do that. And the characters surrounding the hero. This is important. By the way, if you're taking notes and you're interested, like, hey man, I'd really like to explore this, or maybe I need to go one thing. I spent years and so much money going to this very, very Tony film school. Everything I've done for a living for 30 years was in a $20 book. So go get it. It's called Screenplay, written by Sid Field. And Sid Field was the master. He's been gone for many years. I wrote a blog saying ode to Sid Field thank you, Sid, when he passed away. Because that's, if you're interested, hey, I want to write a script or I want to write my script better, buy that book, maybe $30 now, I don't know. Open it up, here's my idea, start on page 1. When you finish the book, you'll have your screenplay, it'll be finished. You'll probably have to work on it a lot, but you'll have your first draft. The second book I would advise is a book called The Hero's Journey, on what we just talked about, written by a guy named Chris Vogler. And Chris was a development guy at Disney for years, and his book became the secondary Bible in the movie industry, especially when they'd hire people like me to rewrite a screenplay. So I'm a little all over the place, but I'm really not. These are the components of a successful movie. I got the hero, man, woman, whoever the story is going to rise to something better themselves. But here's the thing that lots of people forget. It's either so bad or just not bad enough. But the most interesting thing in a movie is what? The bad guy. We love villains. Actors, Anthony Hopkins has won how many Academy Awards and everything, and these beautiful, beautiful, noble characters. Nothing was more fun than Hannibal Lecter. nothing. And we love it. Listen to me. That movie's 30-something years old. I say Hannibal Lecter, and everybody in this room went ahead and nodded their head. Do you remember Jodie Foster's character's name? Clarice. But you know Hannibal Lecter instantly. Bad guy. And the bad guy's thing has got to ring true to us. He's going to blow up the world and rule the galaxy. All right. So, yeah, okay, that's a bad guy. I mean, you don't believe it. You don't believe it. But I'm going to give you 50 great examples of a bad guy and what he wants. I believe that. And I'm worried about my hero. Spend your time on whatever the evil is that our hero has got to beat. There's always a great sidekick. Always got, unfortunately, and so this was a great truism in my days in Hollywood. Remember Top Gun? And the word was always, sorry, man, Goose has to die. So the sidekick dies in a lot of heroic journeys. I hate it, but it goes all the way back to Sophocles. So sorry if that makes you sad. There's nothing I can do about it. And ladies and gentlemen, love. There's got to be a love interest. It's got to be. It's just, I see movies sometimes, and it's just, there's no love story in it at all. That's okay for a children's movie, certainly, but even elderly people movie. My wife was just going on and on about this movie she just saw. I can't think of the name of it. I'm so sorry. Where the woman has some telemarketer person was a bad guy and took all her money. Does that sound familiar? It's kind of popular right now. And what's that? And who's the star of it? Right. Anyway, there's a love story in there too. It's the universal. It's the universal. I'm going to stay away from the current discussions about love and relationships and everything. My God, have we ever been more confused than we are now? Actually, I really don't think we are. I think we're just under attack. We all want love. Every character wants love. Don't leave that out of your story. It's got to be a wisdom character. There's got to be somebody like Bob Farnsworth to speak wisdom into your life. Bob Yoda Farnsworth, they call him. That's you know. And by the way, just watch the original. I'm sorry, I'm a bitter old dude about the Star Wars thing. They never did better than those first three. I know they're the middle three. I don't care. I don't care. Look back at that old Yoda man. Look back at Obi-Wan. Look at Luke. Look at Darth. Everything I'm telling you right now, right out of the book. Greatest of all time. And I think finally there should always be a funny dude. We got to laugh. We got to laugh. Even in very serious stories, we need to smile at some point. We just went through that a little bit with the Reagan movie that, when we looked at the first cut, we went, we don't have much laughter in here, and we need to kind of go back, stuff that we actually had, and put it back in. Because an audience in 2 hours, you can't handle heavy for 2 hours. You can't handle information for 2 hours. You can't even really handle love for 2 hours. You need to lighten up a little bit. We need to laugh. There you go. There are the components of a successful screenplay. You're welcome. So let me shift this into where I am now and where we are now and why I love being here right now and talking to this amazing group of people. Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about those wacky and wonderful Kendrick brothers. Those guys, now there were Christian and faith films long before the Kendricks. We always say, first faith film guys. No, that's not true. That's not true. But boy, there's no doubt about it. Theirs was not a pebble in the pond. Theirs was a boulder. Probably, I can summarize the story if those of you who actually don't know about it, but they came to Provident Films wanting some free music is how I understand it. For the first, was it Flywheel or something like that? And Provident said, hey man, let's give them some music. Let's see what happens. They go do this. They made this movie for like $100,000 and overnight. Forget about the numbers. It's great. It made like $1.5 million. That's a really big deal for that small of an investment. But secondly, it was like, hey, wait a minute, man. These Jesus movies might actually do something. They followed that one up by Fireproof. Business side of that, they spent $1 million on that. What they spent on that? It wasn't very much. It was $1 to $3 million. It was nothing. But this was a big deal for a church movie and a couple of pastors. The thing walked away with $33.5 million from the box office. Thing is still streaming money in, streaming. All of a sudden, in Hollywood, it's like, hey, wait a minute. This faith thing there might be something to this. I'm close friends with a guy that actually created the faith division of Sony Pictures. A guy by the name of Steve Oken. No longer there. He was replaced by a guy named Rich Peluso. Steve is he has a company called Critical Media Thinking. And I'll never forget, I'm going to tell you a story in a second, because he's the guy who came in and gave me a big lecture to get over myself. But he told me, he said, Howie, he goes, I know you have this attitude that Hollywood just hates Christians. Hey, they're just all evil and everything like that. He said, you need to hear this. If Jesus movies all made $100 million, that's all we'd ever make. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting aside. I'm gonna tell you one more story because I have to. And tell me when I tell you too many stories. Because everything is, and that's what story people do. They make a point and they go, oh, I got a story about this. This same guy that I'm telling you about, because Dave Meacham knows this story as well, how this all began as a studio thing. And he tells this story so much better than me. Steve is sitting at the table, and I believe it was after either Flywheel or Facing the Giants. It was one of those. And they called the head of studio, probably Steve Birch, right? I don't know back then. Anyway, at the big table, and all the executives, and the guy goes, all right, we got to do some of these God movies or something like that. All right, who wants to run the division? Silverstein? Nope. Goldfarb? Nope. Oken, Steve Oken is his name. He goes, I'm a Jew too. And he goes, and he swears this is true. Listen to this punchline. He goes, yeah, but you're from Iowa, and there's a church on every street corner in Iowa. You're running it, kid. And he did a great job with it. He's a beautiful guy. He's a beautiful guy, and had a ball with it. And so, but this was all in the early 2000s, 2002 to 2006. And suddenly, the faith movie is on the radar. It used to be like, just distribute it to some churches or, watch some old thing like, the Ten Commandments. How many times did we watch Charlton Heston and the Ten Commandments? At Easter. Like, yeah, okay. Well, because that's how Hollywood says, yeah, absolutely. Show the Ten. It's like, it's about Jesus. Well, anyway, we'll leave that alone. I think they got wise and started putting Ben-Hur on there. My personal story intersects here. I leave Hollywood, and my wife, the California girl, smarter than me, says, we're moving back to Tennessee. And I'm like, I don't want to go back to Tennessee. I love Tennessee. I love Tennessee, but this is where I work. I don't want to do this. Like, so we're doing it. That's where we're going to raise our kids. Spoiler alert, best move I ever made. So I get here, and I'm like going, man, what am I going to do? I'm a Hollywood screenwriter living in Franklin, Tennessee. Boy, this is going to work out great. Same company I'm talking about, guy gives me a call. He says, hey, man, I know you don't have anything going on. Like, okay, what do you got? Guy by the name of Rich Peluso. And Rich says, hey, there's this optometrist in Memphis, and he's got a script. I'm like going, I have reached the bottom of my career and my life. I said, what kind of movie is it? Well, it's a church movie. And I was like, of course it is. Send it. I got nothing else going on. I'll read the script. And we're very, very close friends to this day, so I can say it without talking about his back. It's like, yeah, it's not going to work. But there was something in it. There was something in it. It was the character. It was the two characters. It was the black dude and the white dude who didn't like each other. And they were cops. But then they needed each other. And I was like, I like this. All right, David, how much money do you have? Oh, Lord. Okay, I'll do it. And I wrote it, and I poured my heart and soul into it. I was like, man, I like this script. I really like this script. He liked this script. He cried. And I said, okay, man, tell me your plan. He says, well, I have $400,000 to make this movie. I'm like, great. Space Cowboys cost $80 million, and now I'm making $400,000 movies. Yeah, God, yeah! By the way, did I mention it's very Jesus honoring? But I was like, okay, Lord, if this is what you want me to do, tell me your plan. He said, well, okay, so it's all church people, all church actors. Great. Okay. And he sends me a couple of videos. I'm like, okay. And I said, okay, who's going to shoot this movie? And he says, my friend Howard actually works for Channel 2 and has his own camera from the TV side. Stop! Stop! Not with my script and not this project. No. David Evans is the most gracious, sweet human being. So the big, formerly hip Hollywood screenwriter goes to Memphis, makes this goofy little $400,000 movie. We were crying in some of the scenes. We got some real actors. It's beautiful. Louis Gossett Jr. came and dropped in 2 days of performance. There's a little movie called The Grace Card. It made $10 million for Sony. I still get checks from it. Yeah, that's it. But here was the thing. I know this is going to be a shock to you, but we had some distribution and marketing problems. And there were some conflicts with the studio, and I kind of thought, Dave, we're getting kind of railroaded by these guys a little bit. And I sort of had to grin and bear it. And typical Hollywood guy, I've got a tude. I got a whole thing. The night it releases, David is sending me these Facebook messages. And you'll forgive me if I get emotional right now because I haven't spoken to my dad in 12 years. We pulled off on the interstate and we cried. I'm going to call my son tonight. He left home. I miss him. It's like, the screen just going like this. I was like, what the hell is your problem? It was like one of the greatest moments of my entire life as an artist. Thank you, Lord. I didn't do that. We didn't do that. He didn't do that. I'm in. Yes, I'm still a Hollywood guy. I still do Hollywood work. I was lucky enough, I was in the Christian music business. I grew up with Amy Grant. But Amy said the same thing. She goes, I'm not a Christian singer. I'm a singer that happens to be a Christian, and 99.9% of everything she does is, oh yeah, it's Jesus right out front, but nothing dishonors Jesus, that's for sure. That's how I do it, but it's funny how God brings me. I'm going to tell you another funny story. Do you know the movie Soul Surfer? Okay, so this is a funny story. And the studio guy who lives right here, Rich Peluso, will tell you. I'm going to tell you the story. It's going to sound like, oh, he can't say that, but I'm going to say it. So, Soul Surfer, if you know, is Bethany Hamilton, the story of the wonderful woman, the young lady. She was 13 years old. She's surfing. A shark bites her arm off. And it's like, oh, it's terrible. And she becomes this absolute Christian icon for young ladies. You know, what a redemption story. She moves on. So the studio, of course, is going to make a movie out of this one. Well, when they finally get the script, they want a hand, and we want to shoot this thing. The family reads it and went, there's not one word about Jesus in this thing. There's not one word about the faith. These are faith people. And we're like, no. And so the marketing guy knows is absolutely, if the family disowns this movie, we can't do that. So I get a call and says, hey man, can you have a look at this thing? I was like, yeah, sure. I said, what's the problem with it? He goes, well, we hired some writers to put some faith in it. I was like, who were these writers? I get the script, and God bless them. I don't know their names. I don't mean it. Anyway, it was laugh out loud bad. I mean, like, clearly they're not Christians. They're not Christians. They did their best, but I knew we'd reached the ridiculous point when the family went and they prayed to the shark to forgive. And I went, okay, that's too far. Here we go. So I was able to, I'm going to thump my chest because I was able to I pulled it out of Turnaround. I actually, she existed, but I really created her and put her first and foremost, the Carrie Underwood character of her youth director. So it didn't have to be our heroine, doing all the preaching. So anyway, it worked and it was great, but Rich and I still laugh about that if you had seen the attempt of non-believers to write faith. I got to move on so I don't go too far. I want to talk quickly about what I'm doing now. So I have a small company here in town, and it's a development company. I write screenplays. I write screenplays for others. I'm developing some things myself. I'll be hopefully shooting something next year. Everybody in this room that is a filmmaker knows that about 5% is lights, camera, action. The 95% is like, can you please give me some money? That's really what this thing always comes down to. But I'm in for the game. I've got a movie in pre-production right now. We're going to be shooting in November about an orphanage at the border, something I really love. And I'm one of a team on that one. And I've got this really great Reagan movie coming out here. I'm not going to over-market that thing right now because I wrote the first draft of this thing 14 years ago, and now we're coming out right now. These things are slow, but they're usually not 14 years slow. And it's been a long, strange trip. I could just keep you here all day thinking, how many times, when will these people finally just give up? And believe me, it came up a lot. It came a lot. We used to have this joke. I'm going to write this blog. They asked me to do it. We had a joke on set where when things would go wrong, which was every hour of every day, anybody who's ever shot a film knows that, and we always go, hey guys, buck up. We got a country to save. It's kind of funny. Now, today, you look at this and go, man, this is when it should have come out. Because let me just tell you right now, Democrat, Republican, I don't care what you are. This is a story of a man's life. A story of a man who failed a lot. This ain't no political commercial. This is about him standing up to this thing. Does anybody even remember communism? Oh, well, it's back, by the way. He stood up to the Soviet Union. He found the purpose, but that was the thing. He didn't find the purpose of his life until he got shot. He tried, he failed, he tried or failed. He succeeded on levels we'll never succeed, but yet he had this emptiness all along because as a boy, his mom told him, there's a purpose in your life. Your job is to find out what God's got in mind for you. And this is a true story. It was the night he was assassinated, his attempted assassination. And he laid in the bed and he told his political adversary, who, by the way, came in the middle of the night to read the 23rd Psalm with him. He said, I know what the purpose of my life is. And the rest of my time on this earth belongs to him. Folks, that's the Reagan movie. And now it's going to be in 3,500 theaters. I'm nervous because it's already because of the toxic environment. We don't talk about people's lives anymore. Is it a Republican movie? Or it's like, no, it's a story of a guy's life. So we'll see. Go see it. I hope you do. But here's the funny part. One of the things that we were worried about is, Reagan was a Christian. The guy loved Jesus. He really did. And it's like, well, we got to be careful we don't come off too Christian. So I'm like, okay, that little section, let's cut that. It's too much. It's too much. Remember, we're doing this. Well, Dennis Quaid, a Nashvilleian now, Dennis has recently refound Jesus. He grew up in the church. And he had his Hollywood darkness, like we all did. And these last 10 years, it's like, I got to make up for lost time. I love my Lord. So he's riffing in this movie about, he's throwing in Jesus in all these scenes. I'm going, I didn't write that. And I'll be danged if it doesn't kind of work. So isn't it funny? It's what you think it's going to be and what you think your control aspect is like, I'm not in control. Yes, it's my movie. I wrote this movie. No, it isn't. It's somebody else. I'm going to read you something. Just about done. Oldest rule in the book is don't read to people, but I wrote it, so I guess it doesn't count, but I guess it counts. And I thought there's no way that I can better talk to us right now. Something I wrote recently. It's not very long. Don't worry about it. According to psychologists, relating is one of the fundamental human needs. We communicate, interact, relate, and express ourselves to one another through story. Story is the heart and soul of human interaction. We are living in the most divided, contentious, confused, and confusing time in this country's history. And it's actually become a popular discussion topic. Is it our entertainment that created this, or is it just reflecting this? The answer is both. With our communication with each other, our stories have largely lost sight of the true reason and meaning of art. The beauty, the excellence, the emotional depth, the human experience in favor of the crass, profane, deconstruction, and often mockery of one another, and of the highest human moralities and virtues held dear by the vast majority of us, and of course, the author of that morality, God himself. It should come as no surprise that we find ourselves deep in a cultural crisis. Good. It ain't working. The world never does. The world never does. What's the answer? It's not in this election this November. It's not the answer. It's not a new law. It's probably not even going back to church. It's Jesus. It's Christ. And we represent him. You don't have to write a movie with a conversion scene every time. I don't. Actually, I did in the Grace card, and it works. But that's not it. It's you. It's me. We're shepherds. That's what we are. I don't see a lot of spring chickens in this room. We're the shepherds. We're the guardians. We're the mentors. We're like, hey, come on, let's do this thing together. And the thing that we do together is how we live. Who we are. We're the ones with the joy. We're the ones with the peace. Yes, it's going to hell around us exactly as he said it would. And that just means we're one day closer to him coming back. But that's the winsomeness that makes people say, I want to be part of this. What about this Jesus thing? It's not in your movie. It's not in my movie. Here's my last story. I didn't really tell you the real reason I got into this. When I moved to Los Angeles, I didn't know why I was coming. Everybody said, you're supposed to. You're a writer, actor, dude. You know, I get there. I was miserable. Why am I here? What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. And I hated college. I didn't do well in college. Who was making the joke about the D's in English? You. Me too, buddy. And I just drifted into a theater one night because I didn't want to be in my dorm room with those three guys that didn't like me very much. And I'm at the end of my rope, man. I'm just like, I don't even know what the movie is. Yeah, here's your $3. That's how much it cost back then. Sit down. And it's that movie, so oft-cited in our side of things, Chariots of Fire. I didn't know a thing about it. And I, like probably all of you, was weeping like a baby as he came around that last turn. And quoting the end of Isaiah 40. And then he says, because when I run, I feel his pleasure. I went, I want some of that. 42 years later, I'm still going after that. I love feeling his pleasure. And I love his love. And love wins every time. Thanks a lot.